Hello, and welcome to our book study, Rise of the False Gods. Yesterday, we asked the question, if they're false gods, where do they get their power? And I hope that was answered. Now, there were a couple of things that stuck in my mind that I'd like to look back at today, just to make sure that I had everything. So I'm just going to tilt this again just a little bit like that. Much better. Okay. So let's see where we left off. Okay, we were talking about our susceptibility to false gods, and that what makes us susceptible is our lower or carnal human mind, okay? And that includes our thinking and feeling nature. It is thoughts plus feelings that equal manifestation. So if those thoughts and feelings are going upward, spiritual thoughts and feelings, that's dandy. But if they're staying down low, that's where we get into trouble, because we are listening to our lower way of living than our higher way of living. So we talked about the story of Adam and Eve yesterday, and that when they were booted out of paradise, it said that God gave them skins to wear. Some say skins, some say animal skins. And I did pose then the thought, if we look at it metaphysically, that when we're in a pure spiritual state, we don't need this fleshly experience to grow, but we're here to grow. We're here to learn. So when God said flesh, and he gave them animal skins to wear, what it is, this is our animal skin, okay? So our thoughts and our feelings run what goes on with this animal skin. The false god's power is in the ability to keep us in our lower consciousness. And so here we are living in our human skins, yet we are still children of God. You think, how could we possibly get into so much trouble? Well, let's look at some of the ways. First of all, we are distracted. Our attention is drawn down to the lower nature everywhere we look. I mean, television, advertisements, all the things that are pertaining to the pleasures of the lower human nature, the sense world, sensuality. Now, don't get me wrong, sensuality is not a bad thing, because look, if it weren't for sex, none of us would be here, okay? And if we knew where it would lead sometime, like when you have teenagers, there probably wouldn't be many of us running around today. So there's nothing wrong with pleasure. It's when we put pleasure before our spiritual nature that we can have problems. God first. And if we just add that little extra O to God and we have good, then we want to have everything good in our mind, right? Think about it. When you're down and miserable, that is the playground of the false gods, because they play on your emotions. They make us very drawn into ourselves and what we want. I know you may not agree with me. That's okay. And I do want to add that you probably won't agree with me about everything, and that is perfectly fine. All I ask is that you ponder something I say, to consider the possibility I just may have a point there. Okay. So we are living in a culture that has demoted God, that has demoted a higher power. If you talk to anyone who has overcome addiction, or who is working with addiction, when I was in seminary, we talked a lot about the 12-step program. And Unity attracts a lot of 12-steppers. And that's a good thing. But it starts out with, I have to admit, I of myself am powerless, but I have a higher power that can help me with this. Now, you can look at this as two ways. Our higher power as our very own spiritual nature and connection to God, okay? So when you're saying higher power, but we never want to look at the thing of higher power like we're expecting God to do our work, okay? We're here to do our work to grow. So we put, if you think about right now, think about what they're offering in stores, what's on television, what's in the movies, what's in the music, and you'll see that we are prompted to, our cravings are prompted for money, stuff, ego, physical beauty, and sensuality. Why? Why? Because, for one thing, there's money in it. You know, that old thing. What movie was it? Cabaret? Sang that song, money makes the world go round, world go round. No, it doesn't. It only does if you give it power. Just like sex, there's nothing wrong with money. It ain't what you got. It's what you do with it. Do we do good with it? I never could figure out, and I'm going to tell you something that gets to my heart and soul every day. You know, we have so much military spending. And of course, everybody wants to be protected. We know we've got to. But what if we took some of that money to feed people? Come on, folks. There's, you know, we've got enough bombs to blow up the entire planet. And we do. And we do. And we don't want to ever have to exercise such a power. Did you ever hear people always talking about stuff, but they're not talking about being peacemakers? You know, I mean, how can we make peace? I think that's important. And that's a part of our spiritual growth, to learn not to kill each other, to learn that we need each other. But in our higher mind and spirit, we know that. We know we're all one. But when you get down to lower consciousness, it's looking out for number one. You know? We yes, it's important to take care of ourselves, but when we put ourselves before the highest good of the whole, that is when we make mistakes, okay? So, we want to always think about and do good for others. So, our emotions and our thoughts give fuel to the false power of God, to the power of false gods that we're trying to overcome. Think about the last time you got suddenly emotional, you know, and when we are overly emotional, we can just totally lose track of what is fact and what is true. Why? Because we're in our emotional state. We're in the lower. Remember, lower consciousness is human thought and human emotion. Higher consciousness is intuitive and sensing. That's a battle we have every day, but it's a battle I am willing to fight. There's a saying that goes around about, you know, oh, the world is perfect, everyone's wonderful, and I knew that I was going to have a wonderful day, and then I got out of bed. Got along with everyone in the house until I got out of bed. That's kind of the way it is, though. When we operate from our lower self, that's where the false gods are getting their power. Our friends are also very important. Who do we connect with? Who do we associate with? If your friends, and again, when you look at people who deal with addiction, one of the things they have to do is they have to get away from the people that are holding them down. Are they evil? No, they're holding them down. Where they are in consciousness is where you don't want to be. Everybody has to grow to their own part. Okay, there are so many distractions that keep us from thinking about spirit. I always made jokes about all the people that like to worship at St. Mattress. Yeah, I know. The body wants to stay in bed. You know, there's that joke about the guy, his mother comes banging on the door and she says, John, you got to go to church now. He goes, I don't want to go to church today. She goes, John, you got to go to church now. And he says, I don't want to go to church today. And she says, John, get out of bed. You're the minister. Have you had those mornings where it was time to get out of bed and go to church and you just didn't feel like it? But when we make ourselves do it, when we say, I'm going to go because I know I'm going to come out feeling better, we do. You know what one of the worst things is? When you know you've been in the power under the influence of false gods, if you are experiencing a horrible thing called regret. Had much of that lately? I've had enough to last a lifetime. So I try very hard not to do anything I will regret. How do I avoid doing things I will regret? Because I learned from the last time I did it. That's our goal. And you know what? When you're learning through your own mistakes, you can't condemn yourselves. You mustn't condemn yourselves. You are still a child of God. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. But sometimes that is pretty darn human, I'll tell you. But don't beat yourself up. Prop yourself up by remembering you are a good person. You know a great way to remember that? Do you have kids of your own? Because do you know how you love your kids? Even on the worst day when they are being the worst little booger in the world, when they are trashing their toys and being mean to their siblings, or even when they're a teenager and giving you the eye roll every time you try to talk to them and make sense. Do you love them any less? Do you? Somebody make a comment, say, no, I don't love them any less. Of course you don't love them any less. That's the same way that God loves you. And that's the same way that you got to learn to love yourself. We made a mistake, we're learning, we make amends, we get over it, we move on. I think about some people being really mired in things like the Disney kids. The Disney kids are the kids that have been in Disney movies all their lives. You know, they start real young and we've watched them grow up on, bless her heart, Annette Funicello. She really did a wonderful job, wonderful person, and lived a good life. Died too soon, but lived a good life. But there are those who had great challenges because in the entertainment industry, it is very, very much dependent on the ego of the person to have the stamina and the drive to want to do this. And it's fine if you can be like Michael Landon. I know he's long gone. Stairway to Heaven, I think, is one of his. He was in a lot of shows. What was he in? Little House on the Prairie. But anyway, he lived a good and scandal-free life, but he could handle his ego. Not everybody can handle their ego. And when kids, the Disney kids, are brought up making movies, it's a not typical life, and they're very used to the perks that the movies have. So what do you got? You've got money, you got power, and you got lots of attention to your ego. And some people who are very, very good performers, and one of my favorites, and I don't think I've seen her in much lately, was Lindsay Lohan. I mean, thank you, Cheryl. Highway to Heaven, yes. Lindsay Lohan, I loved her. If you ever saw the movie Mean Girls, it is hilarious. It's a good movie. She's a good actress. She was in the movie remake, I think, of Freaky Friday. Britney Spears and Corey Feldman. They're three performers that I really, really like. And look at the tough spots they got into, driven by ego and privilege and stuff like that. That's false gods. And in some of their cases, they stunted their careers. Some people lost their careers altogether through the entitlement and the drugs and everything that they came to it. So that's false gods. These people had great, great potential and ability, and I hope as they mature that they get to express that. So this is the impact that a false god can have on your life. One of the biggest problems we have as a distraction to our spiritual side is technology addiction. It is an addiction. You see people, kids on their playing games. What do you call those things? Video games, PlayStation, Xbox, all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with an Xbox, a PlayStation, or the video games. What's not healthy about it is when it becomes more important than actually living your life. To live someone else's life through a game or through media, that is it's a false god. You see, a false sense of good. Oh yeah, I've been on the planet now for 75 years, and I can tell you that 60 years ago things were very different. 70. I remember way back, let me tell you. But back in my day, as the old folks say, as the old wise folks say, this is true, and I know this is true because I was there. Everyone knew their neighbors. We lived in a small lake community, and believe me, the lake wasn't that small. But when everybody knew everybody, and when there was a school event, everybody, all the parents got together and talked. And this is the God's honest truth. My mother would go out on the porch if my sister was out playing with her friends and it was supper time, and she would go, "Valerie," from the front porch. And believe it or not, a lady from across the lake would call her up and say, "She's not over here, Muriel." And that's the truth. But we all knew each other. We were tighter. Churches, it didn't matter what church you went to. Most people went to church. Now, I'm not so much laying into people to go to church. What I'm saying is church helps us to be stronger and honor our spiritual side and get attuned to true values. Because out in the world, you're not going to get that, okay? The past wasn't perfect, but when I hear people say, usually people that are significantly younger than me, "Oh, things aren't really different as they were then," you just hear about it more because of the technology. I would beg to differ with you. I was there. I knew what I'm talking about, and all my friends agree. Okay. No, the past wasn't perfect, but our current state of affairs have they haven't escalated, because to escalate would be go up. So they have gone down. They have broken down there, and it doesn't mean we can't turn it around, because we can. Sure, we lived a better life 60 years ago, but we can also live a better life 6 days from now, 6 minutes from now. When we make up our mind, we're going to change the world, and we're going to start with ourselves. We really need to get to know each other. Back then, in those days, everybody, there were potlucks, neighborhood things. We played bingo in the played bingo in the rec. I don't know what it was called. It was called a rec hall or something down by the lake. And we used, for our bingo chips, we used macaronis and dried corn and beans. And we played for prizes. I don't even know who donated the prizes, but we loved going to play bingo. Again, we came together. Today we are divided and subdivided and fractured and splintered. And if we want to become the spiritual power that we are, we need to reunite. We're not going to get along with everybody, but we can be polite, we can be respectful, and we can acknowledge there is a higher power that we are all a part of. That is a true God, true good. Lower consciousness, false gods, can't count on them. Um, we can all do great things. People can do great things that are stunning. I watched a documentary the other day about a little boy, 6 years old, okay? 6. Think about this. You know any 6 year olds? Think about this 6 year old. He watched something on television about people that didn't have water, people in Africa. And they talked about the need to build wells. And he decided, I'm going to build a well. And so he started saving his money so he could have a well built in Africa. And he saved, and he thought he needed $72. Once he got the $72, he was told it would take much, much more than that. But he didn't give up. He reached out. He talked to everyone he knew. He collected all the donations he could get. They put him on a local radio station, and he got his money together, and he wound up having a well dug for the people in Africa. And when that well was dug, the first time they pumped it and they had the water coming out of that ground, they invited that 6-year-old boy to come and put out his hands and get some of that first water out of the well. 6 years old. If a 6-year-old can do wonderful things, we can do wonderful things. It doesn't take a lot. It takes hope, it takes faith, and it takes focusing on the good, focusing on the possibilities, and not just focusing about me, my, mine, I want, and living vicariously through television, games, live a real life. My mother-in-law used to, every afternoon, she'd sit down and make herself a cup of tea and watch her stories. Sometimes the people that watch the stories, those stories become as if they were real life. Live your own life. Live your best life. Don't try to live through someone else. You don't want your life to be the figment of someone else's imagination. Someone else may think you need to do this or do that. You need one person. It's not a person, the Spirit. You need the Holy Spirit of God and you, because you were given gifts and talents to express. The lower nature doesn't want you to be doing your gifts and talents because your lower part just wants to be self-satisfied with whatever it wants, whether it's food, whether it's sitting down and vegging out and watching TV. But none of that stuff is healthy for you, and none of it's going to make you feel as good as following your path, finding your destiny, because we all have a destiny. I am sitting on my couch. I don't know how many people are ever going to see this video, but I'm going to tell you something. If what I have to say touches one person, I am doing God's work. If you work for a pet rescue and you're helping stray animals find new homes, you could be doing God's work. I've said this before, my hero, Saint Robert of Hope, Bob Hope, it was his own kind of saint doing a great mission through telling jokes, okay? It doesn't matter whether you are a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond or a little fish in a little pond. It doesn't matter, because when you're doing what you love, you are doing what Spirit wants you to do. Not what the lower nature, the self, the ego wants. You're doing what Spirit wants you to do. So overpower those false gods through the power that you are. So glad you joined me. I hope you get to see more and more. Like I say, if you go to YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a thing. And always feel free to please comment. I love your comments. Love to know you're here. Love to know you're with me, whether you're here now or in 10 hours from now. and I see it when I get out of bed in the morning. So God bless you. Have a very good evening. You have the power. You have the power over the false gods. Now go and be your amazing self. Bye.